Let's talk about my most improved defenses going into the 2023 NFL season. We already did most improved offenses going into this year. Make sure that you guys go ahead and check that out. We first got to start off with the Detroit Lions. These dudes had a tremendous secondary overhaul that they did over the course of this offseason. In free agency, they signed former Steelers cornerback Cameron Sutton. You also signed former 49ers cornerback Emmanuel Mosley. You got CJ Gardner-Johnson on a one-year deal for a really reasonable price. I don't know how the hell they were able to pull that off. And then you drafted rookie linebacker out of Iowa, Jack Campbell. You got Alabama defensive back Brian Branch. This Detroit Lions defense is going to be really good this season. They already are going to have a really good pass rush with James Houston and Aiden Hutchinson. And now you improve that secondary. This defense should be drastically better this season compared to how it was last year. Now, next up, we got the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Miami Dolphins may not have had the flashy signings that the Detroit Lions had, but they were able to hire Vic Fangio, who is one of the biggest additions of this offseason in most people's eyes. And then they traded for Jalen Ramsey, and they basically got him for a third-round pick and an unknown tight end named Hunter Long. Now, the Miami Dolphins, like I said, they didn't make as many signings as the Detroit Lions have, but they are a way better defense going into this season than what they were last year under their former defensive coordinator, Josh Boyer. You have Vic Fangio, who is the most influential defensive coordinator in the NFL right now. There are several head coaches and defensive coordinators who have had their style of defense influenced heavily by Vic Fangio. And now you got the godfather of it. And the Miami Dolphins, in my eyes, are a dark horse Super Bowl contender because of the signing of Vic Fangio. This man is the highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL, and for a very good reason. Everywhere he's been, he's had elite defenses. You go back to the time when he was the head coach for the Denver Broncos, they had an elite defense every single season that he was there, basically. And going to the Miami Dolphins, you have one of the most talented defenses in the NFL. So I think that this Dolphins defense is going to end up being one of the top 10 best in the NFL this season. The Houston Texans, man, I think that a lot of people are really overlooking the Texans going into this season, man. I think that this is one of the most underrated teams in the NFL for the 2023 season. You hire D'Amico Ryans, and you're giving him some of the best young players in the league. Jalen Petrie, this man led Houston in tackles and interceptions last year as a rookie safety, and I'm surprised that not too many people know how good Jalen Petrie actually is. We know about Derek Stingley, who got held back due to the system and scheme that he was in of Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith is gone. You're giving him a legitimate defensive mind, somebody who's going to be able to get the most out of Derek Stingley. Then you sign Jimmy Ward, Denzel Perryman, and free agency. So this is going to be a super talented defense that the Houston Texans are going to be walking into with this season. D'Amico Ryans, right out the gate, should have this Texans defense playing at a high level, and it's a large reason why I think the Texans have a small chance at being able to compete for the AFC South this year. A lot of people think that the Texans aren't going to win more than 5 or 6 games, but I think that the Texans are going to be able to at least win 7 games and potentially be able to compete for at least second place in this division with the Tennessee Titans. And I think right now, the Texans have a better team than the Tennessee Titans right now. Now, of course, we're going to give Tennessee a little bit of the benefit of a doubt because they have Mike Vrabel as their head coach, and he is a really good head coach. But for the Houston Texans, man, defensively, this is one of the most talented young defenses in the NFL. You traded up for Will Anderson, who was the best defensive player in this draft in a lot of people's eyes, over Jalen Carter. The Houston Texans defense is going to be really ferocious this season, man. I think that this is going to be an elite defense. Year 1 under D'Amico Ryans, he did a fantastic job as a DC for the San Francisco 49ers, and I expect that to carry over to Houston. The Chicago Bears last year had one of the worst defenses in the NFL. They made some really big signings this offseason, signing linebackers TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmunds. And then you have Matt Eberflus as your head coach. And Matt Eberflus formerly was the DC for the Indianapolis Colts. So if you're a defensive-minded coach, the best portion of your team should be the defense. And for Matt Eberflus, I expect this defense to take a tremendous leap of improvement this season. You also bring in the edge rusher DeMarcus Walker, who I think could have a really good season for Chicago this year. They desperately need some pass rushers in there. Last year, they were unable to get pressure at all. You drafted Tyreek Stevenson, and you're going to be pairing him up with Jalen Johnson. There's also another good cornerback that they drafted last year out of Washington who had a really good rookie season. I think his name is Kyler Gordon, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a really talented defense that the Chicago Bears are going to have going into this season. I also can't forget about safety Jaquan Brisker, who is just as good as Jalen Petrie. Both of those guys were pretty much competing for who earned the title of the best rookie safety in the league last year. The Chicago Bears defense, man, they were 31st last year against the run. Their pass defense was in the middle of the pack. The run defense should drastically improve this year, and this pass defense could be amongst the best in the NFL this year when you look at the talent that they have in the secondary and with the improvements that they've made up front. And the last team that I have are the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, man, this defense was a little bit of a letdown in my opinion last year. I thought that this defense was going to be way better than what it was last year. Now, they are going to have Devon Witherspoon, who they drafted really high in this past year's draft, being paired up alongside of Tariq Woolen. And there are a lot of Seahawks fans that would tell you that Tariq Woolen should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. And many of them will tell you confidently that he's better than Sauce Gardner. Now, I'm not going to go that far, but I do think that Tariq Woolen is a really talented cornerback. You also got Kobe Bryant, who's going into his second season. Hopefully, Jamal Adams can get back healthy. You did sign Julian Love. He had a pretty good season last year for the New York Giants. Quandre Diggs is still a pretty serviceable safety. But what has me excited about Seattle's defense the most is how good their defensive line is going to be, man. Their best pass rushers last year were Darrell Taylor, Uchenna Nwosu, who both had 9.5 sacks. They signed Draymond Jones in free agency. This dude was a freaking beast for the Denver Broncos, and I think he's one of the more underrated interior defensive linemen in the game. When you think about some of the best interior defensive linemen in the game, you think about Aaron Donald and Chris Jones, but Draymond Jones, even though he's not on their level, I think he's a tier below them. Anytime you can get a defensive tackle that can give you 6, 7 sacks a season from that position, they deserve a lot of attention. And then you bring back Jarran Reed, who had a lot of success before he left Seattle. He briefly had stints with the Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers, and now he returns to the franchise where he had the most success with. You bring back Bobby Wagner, who never should have left in the first place. Shame on Seattle for allowing that to happen. The Seattle Seahawks defense should be really good this year, man. They were 30th against the run. They were 25th in points per game allowed, and they were 28th in yards per game allowed. All those should improve this season, this year, for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, these are my most improved defenses going into the 2023 NFL season. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you think that there's a team that I left off who should be on this list.